Good to see you. International travel for Queensland is essential for the tourism industry. What's your take on the latest comments that, you know, even with a vaccine rollout, the international borders may just stay closed?
Good afternoon, Kenny. Thank you. Look, it is a concern, of course, to see that there is no apparent plan for getting us back to a more open border situation. Clearly, we will eventually need to open the borders, not just for the economy, but for the community, for all the people who have friends and relatives overseas, and for trade in general. We will need to open the borders at some point. And whilst we appreciate, of course, the excellent health outcomes that we have here in Australia and the freedom we enjoy here in Australia, we need to make a plan and have a strategy to tell us how we get to the other side. And that involves, of course, the quarantine centres, the vaccine rollout, the tracing that's in place, and all of that both here and internationally. But what we expect is the government to take us into the confidence and explain to us how will this happen eventually.
So your main concern is that there's no plan. I just want to run two scenarios past you. So at the moment, we've got borders closed, which is generally keeping COVID out of the country, and so there's not many lockdowns and people are moving freely within the country. That benefit to the tourism industry in Queensland compared to international borders open and maybe more instances of COVID throughout the community where there may be more lockdowns and people maybe not moving around and spending more internally. Have you sort of run the numbers or anything like that and figured out what scenario there is better or worse?
Well, clearly the domestic tourism market is going quite well at the moment. We appreciate that we can do that on the basis of the health measures that have been put in place in Australia. So we're enjoying those freedoms, not just as an industry, but as a community. It's terrific. I was myself up in North Queensland last week. There's a lot of activity. People are travelling from interstate. It's fantastic to see. And we are fortunate to be in this position. And we don't want to put that in jeopardy. But we still need a long-term plan to get back to a more open environment where we can move across borders. We seem to be able to do it for 2,000 athletes that will go overseas very soon to the Olympics. They will presumably allowed to come back. And we have to make sure that we have in place measures that allow a broader part of the population to travel. And vaccines will be an important part of that. And the rollout both here and internationally will give us some sort of confidence. But all I'm saying is we need a strategy, we need a plan, we need some path, not just saying, well, we'll just keep the borders closed forever. That's, I think, not really an option for the long term.
I guess what you're talking about is also confidence. Having the plan gives people confidence and they may just push through a little more instead of just going, well, you know, throwing their hands in the air and calling it quits.
Yes, that's exactly right. And look, the situation in Europe, for instance, is vastly different and terribly tragic compared to us. And we're fortunate that we're not in the same position. But they at least are now planning how they're going to move to a more open situation with people traveling between certain destinations and under what conditions. And I think we need to plan for the same kind of scenario so we can actually give the population some confidence that we will be coming out of this and there will be a path forward and we will be able to enjoy our lives with some normality again.
How are businesses going in the tourism sector in Queensland post-JobKeeper?
Well, some of them are certainly still struggling. We are fortunate, and again, it's thanks to the health situation we have, we are fortunate to have a domestic tourism sector that's doing very well now, and that's benefiting many operators in the hospitality sector and tourism and accommodation and tours right across the state, right across the country, I'm sure. But some businesses who were heavily focused on international travel, they struggle still, and they still have a difficulty pivoting, as they say, to new markets and enticing domestic visitors using their services. That will be a challenge that will be ongoing, and many businesses will continue to struggle. And the industry will survive in some form, but we will need to a continued partnership with state and federal governments to make sure we get the most out of a sector that delivers so much employment and so many opportunities to regional Australia.
This week we heard some European countries like the UK have started to open up to international travel once again on a limited basis without quarantine. Why do you think we're so gun shy here in Australia?
Well, I think we are enjoying the benefits of having such low infection rates in Australia. I think that is clearly the primary reason and the prime rationale that is being applied. And we have been exceptionally fortunate. I think we are probably, if not the lowest infection rate countries, then certainly one of those. And nobody wants to put that in jeopardy. I think we all enjoy the freedom that comes with it, and we see the terrible stories that come out of some parts of the world that they are less fortunate than us. So we want to protect that, and we need to balance the risks. We all know that, but we do have to nevertheless map a path to the future and figure out how we live with a virus that apparently will be around for years around the globe somewhere. We have to find a way to work with that and live with that.
One last question, Mr. Gschwind. If the borders stay closed for another 12 months, what happens then to Queensland tourism?
Well, there certainly will be major adjustments that have to be made to some of the investments and some of the properties and some of the operations. There will be huge adjustments that have to be made more permanent. At the moment, many of these activities are in hibernation, if you like, or on a low rate. But some more permanent changes will take place, and it will be quite painful for the industry, of course.